Hey everybody, this is Greg Austin with Inclusive Fitness. I'm joined today by Eric Chessen, founder of Autism Fitness. And we're just doing a little conversation about some things that are important to the two of us and kind of what's happening in the world today as it relates to neurodiversity and exercise fitness. And so Eric, why don't you introduce yourself and we'll hop right in.
Thanks, Greg. My name, as Greg mentioned, is Eric Chessen. I am the founder of Autism Fitness. And for the past 18 years, I've been developing and implementing fitness and adapted PE programs for the entirety of the autism population of all ages and ability levels. I have an interdisciplinary method that I've developed called the PAC profile. That stands for physical, adaptive, and cognitive. So what we're doing is using best strategies approaches for developing fitness programs that really work for all areas of ability with this population.
Thanks. So I'm going to just dive in. You know, I've already shared a couple of questions with you, but I'm going to go ahead and read these to you.
Yep.
And I'd love to get your thoughts. We can have a bit of a conversation and, you know, just kind of get your perspective on a number of these topics that I think are important today.
Sure.
So Eric, you referenced in one of your latest blogs a new report that highlights that people on the spectrum self-report lower satisfaction with the quality of their lives relative to neurotypical people.
Yeah.
Can you expand on your thoughts about this very unsurprising finding and the impact that exercise and health and fitness in general can have on neurodiverse people?
Sure, and you know, it's unfortunate, but at the same time unsurprising, and I think that's something that you reiterated to me when I posted that article. I think when we look at a needs-based assessment for an individual on the autism spectrum, we really have to consider what is at least you know, approximate to what we consider, you know, a values-based vantage point. What are the things that are going to be most critical for optimal development, not just from, you know, an academic standpoint, or not just what we could call for show, which might need a little bit more explanation, but what is something that is going to be inherently useful, valuable, and really beneficial for that particular individual, not just now, but along their lifetime. And I think there's a resounding and overwhelming amount of evidence that shows fitness and physical activity and being healthy from a variety of different standpoints, sleep, nutrition, contribute to overall wellness and life satisfaction. And it's something that has been grossly ignored in this population, and now we're seeing the results of that. And the last thing I'll say on that right now, just in general, is this stems back to a conversation that that you and I have had multiple times, where we talk about you know, the idea of running a research program or having some type of study in place that measures the results between a sample of the autism population that doesn't have access to fitness and healthy living programs and one that does. And I remarked that we've already done the former, that we've already we see what the outcome is right now.
The results of that already.
Yeah, are in that study. So right. A lot of the things that, but the fortunate thing is a lot of the things that we already know to be true about healthy living and physical activity for the general population is true as well for the neuroatypical population. We just need to implement it.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. I think as I reflect on what you said, it's just so obvious that it is even surprising that we're surprised by these outcomes, right? Because let's face it, you and I both are avid exercisers. Our partners are avid exercisers, and we know people who are deeply committed to it, and what an enormous difference it makes in our lives.
Sure.
Versus people who don't.
Right.
And even those who don't know the impact that exercise can have on their lives. And so there's no question whatsoever that people like my son Lucas and all the types of clients you work with benefit greatly from exercise and being physically fit. It's just that they may not know how to articulate it in a way that we typically would.
Yeah.
And I think that is one of the significant challenges, is that it's already hard enough for neurotypical people like us to stay fit. It's a difficult thing to do. And we have a lot of the access that we need, and there's very few barriers.
Sure.
And yet people who are neurodiverse don't have nearly as much access, and really do struggle to even articulate that they want to do this, or even struggle to want to do it.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? Oh, go ahead. You're going to say something.
Oh yeah, and no, it's actually segueing into I think what you were going to ask me. So please continue.
Yeah, well, I think one of the struggles that we'll get to in a minute, and then the second question is relevant here, is a lot of neurodiverse people, from my experience, and I think from your experience, do sort of struggle with wanting to exercise, right? To be physically active. But it's not just relegated to exercise. Sometimes it's that they don't want to do a lot of things.
Yeah.
And so maybe you can expound on that a little bit, and sort of how that plays into this challenge.
Yeah, and I love the point that you left off on, because it's the perfect springboard towards my answer. Actually, we know that one of the traits inherent to the autism population is there is a rigidity or limitations around the repertoire of things that an individual likes to do, or that finds comfort in, or is willing to engage in on a regular basis, or for the first time. So with exercise and with being physically active, similar to, I've had plenty of athletes when I'm also running other curricula with them, they don't want to wash their hands. Well, guess what? We would never say, or I would hope we would never say, well, since you don't like it, you don't have to wash.
Yes, you don't have to do it.
It's basic hygiene, especially right now in June 2020. Right. It is literally a life critical skill to be able to wash your hands. So I don't think anyone would argue, well, they don't like washing their hands, so they don't have to learn. Yeah, I think it's an unfortunate fact that might be the case, because I've seen some awful examples of hand washing, but nonetheless, I don't think anybody would consider it a secondary skill set, all right? So in answer to both this question and something that you raised earlier, with respect to fitness, is it necessarily simple or easy to implement? No, but it depends what we prioritize. And ultimately, it comes down to prioritization. Because if we're looking at fitness as a life skill and something that should be spoken about in the same sentence as speech and hygiene and socialization, then we will prioritize it. So, with Autism Fitness, for example, we're a methodology. So we're in the practice of, this is how you create and implement a fitness program that works for an individual. But in order for it to work, it has to be implemented. And in order to be implemented, there has to be priority taken. So it can't be, oh, maybe we'll get to fitness, and oh, fitness is a nice idea, and oh, wouldn't it be great? You either do it or you don't do it. And if you choose to do it, we can provide you with the best possible ways how. But that impetus has to be, that motivation has to be on the part of the person who decides fitness is important, because it's one thing to pay lip service to it and another thing to actually, start doing the program.
Absolutely, and it's funny. You went straight into my second question perfectly, because that question really is about those priorities. Mm-hmm. One of the things that I think about and that I hear about when I have conversations with some of our clients and athletes, parents, is that they already feel overwhelmed. As a parent of somebody who's neurodiverse, I feel overwhelmed, especially today with COVID, all the stuff that we're having to learn, in addition to the everyday stuff we have to deal with. Mm-hmm. Oftentimes I hear people say, well, there are other things that are more important, right? Mm-hmm. I have other priorities, and yes, I agree that exercise is important. What would you say to make the case that, well, this needs to be at the top of the priority list? Because especially referring back to the first question I asked, that article you referred to, which said they have a lower self-reported satisfaction with life. Sure. We know that physical fitness has a significant bearing on one's self-reporting of satisfaction of life. How do we help parents understand that this has to be a priority, even though it's a challenge, and even though there are a million other challenges they got to face?
I love not only this question, but the time you're the time frame in which you're asking me about it, because the first thing it makes me think of, and I've never spoken about this before, but my friend and business coach, Justin, who I trust and respect immensely, he has this great grid system for deciding what's important in a business, and the same thing can be true what's important in life. And it's just a cross, and you're looking at things from what's the most important right now and what's going to provide the most impact, and everything else has relative amounts of importance. So the whole idea of being overwhelmed, and I would never tell anybody, no, you're not overwhelmed right now, but if you think about being overwhelmed is a function of indecision, because you don't know what should be priority. But if you make that decision and say, okay, well, fitness is priority, and we have to look first at, you take Maslow's hierarchy and you say, okay, is everybody safe? Is anybody on fire right now? No. Okay. And in the household of someone with autism, there could be severe behaviors that need to be addressed first. So if we're talking about self-injury, or we're talking about aggression, or we're talking about pica.
And those are clearly at the top there.
Yeah,
always.
Always. You're going to, so satisfying any medical emergencies or underlying medical issues first, we say, okay, what's our next level of importance? Everybody gets fed. Okay, great. Is everybody fed? Great. And then we look at, okay, what's important next? So I think overwhelm is just looking at everything as, as number one priority, when you can say, well, fitness really is important. So maybe instead of, a half hour of YouTube or whatever, how much TV time is, we do 5 minutes of this. And in autism fitness, and we'll probably get to this later, we talk about the most effective programming in the home being, short and often. So you don't need to do a full 45 minutes to start with, but let's start with 5, right? So I think the overwhelm, and it's not to at all mitigate or even push back against how
or minimize.
Or minimize how thank you, how parents feel. But really, if we break down being overwhelmed, what is it? Well, it's a point of indecision. Yeah. So just sit down and say, just list out what are the priorities. And it's okay, whatever your priorities are, your priorities. I have mine, you have yours, and certainly I'm biased I'm the founder of Autism Fitness, so I'm always saying, okay, yeah, fitness, because I know what it can do. Yep. But really, the adherence has to be to that list of priorities. Otherwise, the overwhelm is just going to persist.
Yeah, we've done it again. We've slipped into the third question perfectly. It's almost like I sent the questions in advance, but this is organic, so it's working really well.
Yeah.
But this gets to that third question, which I think is a really important one, because you're right. It really is about prioritization. But even when people or parents or caregivers or even neurodiverse people themselves are convinced, okay, yes, I get it. Fitness is important. Mm-hmm. The struggles, the challenges, the indecision are still there.
Yeah.
And so one of the things that I try to get parents to think about is, how do you shrink the change, mm-hmm. right? And one of the things you just talked about, I think, is a good example. Doing a little bit very consistently, very often. Yeah. Right? You're shrinking the change. It doesn't have to be an hour-long workout. Let's face it, most people don't do that every day. Most Americans simply don't do that. Yeah. How can we possibly expect, somebody who is coming from a very different place to be able to make that kind of change?
Sure.
So I'd be kind of curious what your thoughts on how do you help parents make those prioritization decisions? You mentioned, like, for example, YouTube. How much time do people spend on social media, reading the news? And by the way, these are fun, they're entertaining, sometimes they're critical. But are there things that we can do as parents and caregivers to rethink our priorities and say, okay, we can take 10 minutes from this, or maybe more or less, and then we don't have to do a whole lot to actually start making that change. What are your thoughts around that? And then I have a follow-up.
Yeah, I think looking at everything right now, and then looking at it 2 weeks from now, and saying, if I do this or don't do this, is it going to make a difference in 2 weeks? So if you do 5 minutes of exercise today and 5 minutes of exercise tomorrow, is that going to make a difference, 13 and a half days from now? If it does, great, absolutely. So you're probably on the right path towards that also. And you think about, we look at the same, aspects of behavior analysis with the neurotypical population that we do with the autism population also. So if you're doing this, if you invest X amount of time right now and X amount of effort, what is the reinforcer going to be? The reinforcer is going to be they learn how to do one push throw, and maybe tomorrow you can do two. So 2 weeks from now, you can have some awesome stuff occurring. You can even have certain exercises that are reinforcing to that individual, stuff that they want to do. So it's the same mechanism as saving money or balancing your bank account. You are investing in something with equity, with effort, because you know that it's going to have a payoff, not only in the interim and not only now, but long term also. So all of the mediums that you're talking about are not bad inherently. If you look at everything as a tool, like you look at social media as a tool, you look at YouTube as a tool, you look at relaxation or just or any type of distraction as a tool, its application, the benefit or detriment of its of it is going to be in the application or lack thereof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about this, and I look at my own behaviors, and I speak about it with friends, and of course Christina, my wife, mm-hmm. and it is so much about making decisions on a regular basis with discipline and purpose.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the follow-up question I had is, so there's actually two. Mm-hmm. The follow-up question is sort of, and this may be, I don't want to be controversial, but it's a difficult one, and I think it's important. I haven't met a parent of a neurodiverse person mm-hmm. Who doesn't already feel an overwhelming sense of responsibility for their child's success, well-being, health, you name it. Yeah. Not only until they're like 21 or 22, as you might expect with a neurotypical kid, but mm-hmm. through to the end of their life, well after we're gone. We've talked about this, what happens when we're gone, what happens after.
Yeah.
And so I think there's an overwhelming sense of responsibility that we already have. Mm-hmm. And yet at the same time, this is an area where I think a lot of parents, and trust me, I've been there myself, sort of fail. We worry about all the other things, mm-hmm. right? We think about their housing, we think about their jobs, we think about their education, we think about their medical situation, we think about their finances, but so seldom is this aspect really thought about, or if it may be thought about, but it isn't prioritized and there's no discipline around it.
Yeah.
And so I struggle with this myself. It's difficult. It's really hard. Yeah. But what have you experienced, and what are your thoughts on that overwhelming sense of responsibility, but we're asking them to do one more thing.
Yeah.
Damn, it's important.
Yeah, absolutely. And that overwhelming feeling of responsibility, I think is just, the ethos of a caring parent. I think it comes with the territory. And I think that there might be some overlap, and this is just me speculating. I think there's some overlap between responsibility and guilt also. But I think that the guilt is also stemming from that fear or concern of the long term, and what does the long term look like? And if you can't answer that, and I don't think there's always an answer, because also what is the world going to look like 20 or 30 or 40 years from now? Also, what care mechanisms are going to be in place? What does the world of special needs look like then? And these are answers that we simply don't have. So what we do have is an opportunity. All we have are opportunities. The ones that we create for ourselves, and the ones that are accessible via other people and other.
This happened.
Yeah, exactly. So I would say I would love, believe me, nothing more than to alleviate parents of that guilt or that worry, and I don't have I don't have an answer that I'd be lying if I said I had an answer, but I think that what we can do is prioritize the things that will give the best possible opportunity to individuals on the autism spectrum and with related developmental disabilities so that they can thrive in whatever the world is 10 years from now or 20 years. And you and I have spoken about this recently also. It doesn't, the responsibility ultimately, and what I think you and I are trying to create is not that the responsibility falls on one or two people, but the responsibility winds up being a community. Because if you have community responsibility, then you don't have that same amount of overwhelm. It's not, we have to, and you and I have spoken about this, and I hope you don't mind me bringing it up, but talking about, finding that one or two, people who are going to continue to take care. Yeah. And I think looking at it that way, it's understandable, but at the same time, that does not have to be the future. I think the future is a community.
I think so too, and I think a lot about Lucas's community and what are we going to do to create that. And again, kind of bringing it back to health and fitness, which is sort of an underrepresented priority.
Yeah.
How do we ensure that community in the future continually reinforces his overall health and serves as a model for him, so that he maintains whatever opportunities we take advantage of now and continues them in the future, even after we're gone. Right. So that he does have a higher satisfaction in life. He does feel better about himself. He has higher confidence. He doesn't have back pain, for example. Yeah. Or if he does, it's not because he's not fit.
Right. Right. And I'm glad, again, thank you for bringing that up, because it segues into what I was going to start with which is not from a fear-mongering perspective, because I don't want to say, look at what'll happen. What I will say is that it's going to be a lot better, and then this is truly where we get into quality of life. It's going to be a lot better both for that individual on the autism spectrum and his or her caretakers in the future, if that individual does not have low back pain or does not have type 2 diabetes or does not have some other medical. Because imagine all the further medical complications, and I've seen this, and all the other extra steps that someone has to take when all of these things are completely preventable, because they're lifestyle related. So if we have someone who's healthy and active and they have a nutritionally sound diet, we really don't have to worry about all of these other medical complications, and it doesn't become a question of who is going to shoot up this potentially self-injurious individual with insulin. It's not a conversation, right?
And that really gets back to what you said a while ago about that investment in the bank.
Yeah.
Right. When we're asking parents to think about this long term and to take on this one more challenge, and to move this up that priority list, it's not because fitness is just great inherently in and of itself. Yeah. It really is because of what you just talked about. I mean, there's the side benefit. There's not the side benefit. It is a core benefit of a higher quality of life and greater satisfaction and all the good stuff that we talked about earlier. But there's also the prevention of all those preventable issues like you were just referring to. That is money in the bank, and it is worth investing in now. And we all know that if we do that over time, it will pay off. But we also know that, especially with this population, if you don't give it that time, you give them a long runway so that over time they can build that foundation, and then, as you said, create that community to reinforce it. That payoff isn't going to come. And there's going to be all these complications. Imagine taking your kid, by this time an adult, to the hospital to deal with all these situations that are, again, preventable. It's already hard enough to do with my son.
Why? Really, even from not necessarily a selfish in a bad way, but even from a self-serving perspective, why would you ever want to give yourself that extra work or that extra stress? Like, who would do that to themselves willingly?
Well, or to the neurodiverse person themselves, right? Why would you want to put them through something that potentially they may not understand or may deeply fear, and that could cause pain.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's money in the bank. Let's move on to the fourth question, because I think this is the one that's perhaps the most relevant to today, which of course is the COVID-19 pandemic. And so, you know, we're already living more complicated lives than we were even just a couple of months ago because of all this. And we all know that it's not going to get a lot simpler fast. Yet we're still saying, and I think a lot of people still believe, that physical fitness does need to be maintained, if not started now, even though we are in these strange times, because we're going to be wearing masks, we're going to be self-isolating, we're going to be social distancing, all of those sort of things for quite some time. So again, thinking of people who have already made the decision, yes, this is important, I need to make this a priority. What are your thoughts around how parents can actually, and other caregivers, overcome some of these challenges and keep their kids, and whether they're adults or children, more physically fit and still building that foundation over the next several months, maybe year or two?
Great question. And I'm going to give you an example that is the best case scenario, and I'm going to work backwards from there, right?
Sure.
So in our last online class of the Autism Fitness certification, we had the mother of a young man on the spectrum in the course. Now, this young man also works with one of our Autism Fitness certified pros in person, but she hasn't been able to work with him because of social distancing and because of the lockdown.
Yeah.
So his mom goes and takes the level 1 certification so that when they do virtual training, she can prompt, mom can prompt him. And just as importantly, she can follow along and she understands the direction, she understands the exercises, she understands that they are on the same page, right? Because they're speaking the same language. They understand what needs to be done and why it's being done also. Right. So I would say that education right now is paramount. And with that education and understanding that, and we talk about this all the time, we are meeting each individual where they are at right now. So what needs to go aside is ego and expectation until we can understand what are the needs right here. So in supplementing in supplementing direct contact with a qualified coach right now is the education and the motivation and the dedication from a parent or a family member or a care provider who is going to be able to become knowledgeable in how do I implement an appropriate and effective fitness program, and not get overwhelmed with I don't know what to do, because that's what we're here for. If you don't know what to do, or even if you think you do, that's what we're here for, right? That's what Autism Fitness exists for. And also to, again, it's about the priorities. And I've always found, and I live in a little bit of a bubble here because I have parents like yourself who come into the certification because they really not only want the information just to have it, but to be able to implement. So I get people who are truly dedicated to this also. But the thing is to just start where it is to start, but you have to have some education to that also, because I'll have parents emailing me saying, oh, they hate to exercise and we tried the treadmill and that didn't work. You have to have a fundamental understanding. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You have to have a little bit more information, and universally, when people become frustrated, it's usually a lack of information or a lack of understanding how to utilize the information or when to use the information also.
Yep. Yeah, I think you nailed it. That's when we partnered on this virtual training program, so that we spent at least 2 hours with the parents in advance.
Yeah.
Just to give them a sense of, okay, what are we doing here? Why are we doing it? And how do you do it?
Yeah.
I've already noticed in the sessions that we're running virtually that the parents are cueing. They're using their hands to say, here's a target, right? And they're not talking as much, right? So they're not overwhelming their kid with audio stimulus. And it makes a huge difference just knowing what to do. But, it is overwhelming for, I think, a lot of parents, because frankly, a lot of adults themselves really don't know how to exercise.
Yeah.
They've never coached before.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can seem overwhelming, but I think one thing to remember is it's not that hard. You know your kid,
Yeah.
but you do need to educate yourself a little bit.
Sure.
And I do think this notion of meeting them where they are and not letting ego get in the way is so important. I told you before, I had one of my athletes. We had a great program going, and his father pushed him too hard when he was visiting him one day.
Yeah.
And sure enough, he hurt his back.
Right.
And it's because his dad thought he could do more. And you don't let that happen. Just take your time. It take as long as you need. Meet them where they are. Shrink that change, often and small. Mm-hmm. Is that the phrase used, or do I have that inverted?
I think you can even invert it. It still works.
Okay, I wasn't sure how you, because I know you like to say it a certain way.
I use short and often.
Short and often. I like that. This is the last question I'll ask, and I stress this when I speak to parents and to groups, is the notion that they themselves need to be a model of health and fitness. Because Christina and I have made a point of making exercise and wellness and nutrition central to our lives, very much like you guys have. And we see the impact that it has on Lucas, because that's the life he leads. We haven't touched on this yet. And again, this is a bit of a touchy issue, because we're already dealing with a population that's overwhelmed, mm-hmm. right? The parents and the caregivers. Yet at the same time, if we really do expect to see change happen, it has to happen in the home more broadly than just saying, okay, we're going to exercise and you're going to do the exercises, mm-hmm. right? It's like, being a model, in addition to a coach, whether it's exercise, wellness, or nutrition, is, I think, really important. Just kind of wrap up your thoughts on that particular issue.
Yeah, there's a certain joy that you have to take in teaching anything, and it comes from inherently loving that thing, or at least having a competence. And it's not to say that every session is going to be the best session on the face of the planet, but it's having in the back of your mind at all times that what you are doing today is going to benefit tomorrow. And again, that 2-week continuum also. And it comes down to the question of also, what do you say you want versus what are you actually doing to get it?
Yeah. Which
seems like a very straightforward, unemotional equation, but that's the reality. Is it's based in action, not in wanting to act. And it's it's priority. And many of the things that will provide us the greatest benefit in life are uncomfortable at first, because we're not, and embarking on anything is going to be uncomfortable because you've never done it before. I mean, you think about the autism population with relation to exercise, and the adversity there, and the anxiety, and I totally get it, but that's the basis of change. Is there has to be a different measure of action taken in order for something new to happen.
Yeah, and I think if they see mom or dad or the siblings eating well, exercising, being active, whether they verbalize it or not, that is being internalized. Yeah, it is becoming the norm of how one lives one's life. Yeah, and I think the decisions we make as parents, as caregivers, as brothers and sisters, as whatever, coaches, we have to take it to that next level as well for this to really be embedded in in a neurodiverse person's life. We have to be that example, that model.
Absolutely, and ultimately, as a parent, you're the decision maker as well. And I've told people on a number of occasions who have asked, during the certification, what do you do if a parent says, I'm not going to, get involved, or I don't think exercise, is important, or we're not going to do that. Say, fine, like, I am not in the convincing business. That's not my job. I am in the, if you want to learn how to do this, learn how to implement this, then, I'm your guy, and this is the program. Yeah. But I'm not, and it's a little different from earlier in my career, where I think there was I think I did have to do a little bit more convincing, or at least convincing via education. But now I think we're in a place where, again, I don't think we are anywhere near where we should be with respect to access of fitness. But I would think, and I could definitely be wrong because it's, my own viewpoint, but I think that when I started 18 years ago, and maybe even 15 years ago when I started promoting the programming, people weren't responding overwhelmingly favorably to fitness for the population. Be like, well, what about speech and socialization? We should do these first, and fitness is just kind of working out, and working out is just working out. Now, if I say, and I'm sure this is the case for you, if I say, oh, it's autism fitness, I don't even need to talk about the curriculum, talk about the programming, talk about the background. People are, oh, that's awesome. Because they kind of get that. I think fitness has a more universally favorable connotation now.
Yeah, and by the way, this is a topic for another conversation.
Yeah.
This notion of the tipping point, where we are today relative to where we were when you first started.
Sure.
That's why I'm starting Inclusive Fitness, because we couldn't have started this even probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Because society wasn't quite ready for it. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that parents were really concerned about those other priorities. But now their kids are getting older. Many of them are young adults now. Some of them are mature adults. And they're starting to realize, oh, crap, we didn't deal with this other thing now. So now so the tipping point has happened. And I think people are starting to realize that this population is not only big, but it has a tremendous potential. And there's more awareness and acceptance of it. And you can't look away. It's like, okay, we need to deal with this. So that's another topic for another day.
And the one thing I'll say on that, and I promise just one thing, is there are real and consequential choices to be made. That there's really a huge choice to be made as to what we are going to prioritize in the lives of teens and young adults and adults on the spectrum right now, because it could go one of two ways. And again, we've seen what happens when it goes the non-prioritization of physical activity way. We're living it right now.
We are. And by the way, whether they're neurotypical or neurodiverse, right? Hey, before we go, do you want to mention the Try This at Home program that you referred to a while ago? I think anybody who's listening has gotten this far into the discussion. Might want to hear about that.
Absolutely. So I do irregularly run a curriculum called Autism Fitness Try This at Home, which is a about 2.5 hour training for parents and family members, introducing the autism fitness methodology, some of the exercises that we use, and of course, as always the case with everything that I do, some takeaway points that you can implement almost immediately. So it's an introduction to how and why our programming works, and what you can do to start a fitness program in your home with limited equipment, and also enough information that you're going to be able to assess a little bit and start a little program.
Fantastic. And we'll provide a link, as they always say, down below.
Yep.
We'll do that to make sure that people can, it's over there somewhere. We'll make sure that people can get access to it, because it's a great program, and I know a lot of people have gotten a lot of benefit from it. So thanks for doing that.
Absolutely.
Hey, it was a lot of fun talking to you, Eric. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Greg. And if anybody else is interested in our work or getting certified, they can go to autismfitness.com.